Hey y'all, welcome back. My name is Christina, and in these videos we have been going through this book together. This is Tracy Hogg's The Baby Whisperer Solves Everything book, and today we are finally on the last chapter, chapter 10, which is essentially just exploring the idea that everything kind of changes with our baby all the time. So just when we have something nailed down, we fixed our baby's sleeping problem, eating problem, whatever it is, something comes up and we have to rethink the way that we do things. So in this chapter, we're kind of getting more into this extended title here. I've never really said this out loud, but it's The Baby Whisperer Solves All Your Problems by teaching you how to ask the right questions. And so this chapter is essentially a bunch of questions that we can ask ourselves for any situation. So if all the other 9 chapters have failed us and whatever behavioral issue, sleep issue, eating issue, potty training issue has come up, then we can ask ourselves these questions and try to get to the root of the problem. And then there's also, so it's 12 essential questions, and then there's also 12 solutions, essentially 12 ways we can get back to normal, whatever that might be. So just as a quick disclaimer, I have no affiliation with this book. I just own it. I love it. I go to it whenever I do have a problem with my daughter that I struggle to pinpoint or fix or come up with a solution for on my own. And so hopefully this chapter, as we talk about it, will help you become a problem solver with your child's problems and help you kind of get a more full understanding of Tracy's methodology, but also a more full understanding of your child and of how they function and how you can fix any issue that may arise in their life. So we're just gonna get into it. Essentially, at the very beginning of this chapter, the one inescapable law of parenting that Tracy lays out is that nothing stays the same for very long. So once you get past a certain issue, your child could start teething and their sleep could be affected. And then after that's over, you could have a new baby and they all of a sudden have behavioral problems. And so it's really this equilibrium of constantly adjusting things to become normal, and then when they get off, then we just come back to our normal and try to stay there for as long as possible before the next thing comes up. So we're gonna get right into those 12 essential questions. So question number 1 is your child approaching a physical milestone or like a developmental stage that is new? So essentially, whatever the problem is, it could be eating, sleep, behavior, potty training, anything. Literally, just look at their age and look at what they should be doing at that age. This is something that we usually can't avoid, but it does affect a whole lot of our child's behavior. So even if it's something as big as taking their first steps for the first time, that can affect their sleep, it can affect their appetite, it can be a whole new box of ways that they can disobey and misbehave and break outside of the rules that you've already set. So what we need to do is just figure out, okay, yeah, that's the milestone. They might not even be there quite yet, but you could know, oh, they should start walking soon, and I can tell that their behavior is affected by that fact. A lot of times we might just have to wait for this thing to pass. So a huge like physical milestone that I think of is when our children start to pull up. If children are pulling up too early, or not too early, but pretty early on in their physical abilities, they actually might pull up in their crib and not know how to get down at night. And that can be a whole new slew of problems of having to go in and lay them down so that they go back to sleep. But what if they keep standing and they keep wanting to practice this in their crib? Sometimes we just have to wait for that to pass. Eventually, they will learn how to sit down on their own. That's something we can practice with them while they're awake, and we might have to go back to pick up, put down to try to help them go back to sleep instead of be awake in their crib doing those things. So that could be a good example of just waiting for that milestone to kind of get old, but there are some times where we do need to tweak some things. So for example, they could just be bored of their toys. So if they hit like 9 months, 6 months, 12 months, anywhere in there, and all of a sudden none of their toys are interesting to them, it could just be that they have mastered them all and we need to get them something new. They also, if they are walking, you might need to actually child-proof your home and provide them with a safe space where you don't have to chase them around and say no all the time, but you can actually let them get their wiggles out and have fun and just do what they want to do and learn through that way. So So that was question number 1. Question number 2 is this new behavior consistent with your child's personality? And this is a great time for us to look at our child's temperament, and if we haven't already done that, to identify what we think they are. If they're an angel baby, textbook baby, grumpy, spirited, or touchy. Did I say touchy? I don't think so. If this behavior is let's say we have a touchy baby and they are suddenly shy at a new play group that we've been going to, we just need to think back and think, wait a second, is this consistent with their behavior? And for a touchy baby, that should be consistent. But if they were a spirited child before and then all of a sudden they're acting very shy at a group that they've even been to before, then we would know that that is not consistent with their temperament and their personality. And so we might be more curious to see if there's something else going on beyond that. So it's very important, in order to get over this question when we ask ourselves it, to understand our child and to understand their personality and what's normal for them. If we're not spending every day with our child, like if we are working or they go to preschool or daycare during the day, then we might not be as aware as to what's kind of normal for them or not. So it's important in those times that we do have time together with them, not just to do activities, but to just sit down and get to know them. All right, so these next 6 questions have to do with routine busters. So I'll go through them really quickly, and then I'm just gonna kind of lump them all together as I talk about them. Question 3 is, has your daily routine recently changed? Question 4 is, has your child's diet changed? Question 5 is your child doing any new activities, and are they age appropriate and temperament appropriate? Number 6, have your child's sleep patterns either during daytime naps or nighttime sleep changed? Number 7, have you been away from home more than usual on a trip or vacation? And number 8 is, has your child been teething, ill, or recovering from an injury or something like that? So a lot of the time when we're asking ourselves these questions, usually it is the problem. It's, oh, my daily routine has changed, my child's diet has changed, my child's sleep habits have changed. So these can be pretty simple questions to ask. But if these are our problems, if we even might have a issue that's coming up and we're answering yes to several of these questions, the core issue is that our routine has been changed and we need to get back to normal, and we need to teach our child what normal is again. If you've broken from your routine lately, then you need to get back to that, and it needs to be age appropriate for your child. Especially if you have been traveling or in a different time zone, then you might just need to give them some time to adjust to that as well. So you'll want to use the easy method. You can reread that in her book. You can also, if your child's sleep has been interrupted, maybe by teething or an illness, you'll have to go back to using pick up, put down if your child is over 4 months old, even if you haven't used it with them. Whenever my daughter has a sleep issue, I did pick up, put down really when she was 4 months old, but even now, as she is almost 15 months, I still will use it if she ever does have trouble going to sleep. It's also important that if our child is in a different environment besides our home, besides with us during the day, if they have a daycare that they go to, or if they have a nanny or a babysitter who comes over, that we take the time to teach them their routine. And it's more difficult for daycare workers to keep up with a child's at-home routine, especially when they have several different children running around. But asking them about the routine that they do at the daycare can be helpful as well. But especially if you do have a worker coming into your home to care for your child, make sure that they understand fully what they should be doing with your child, that they have it written out, and if they need to ask questions about it, that they have the ability to sit down with you and ask those questions. We don't have regular babysitters or nannies, but we do have babysitters in the evening or in the morning from time to time to allow me and my husband to go out on a date or to do other activities. And I always, no matter how many times this person has watched my child, I write out a whole itinerary of what needs to happen, of if this happens, do this, and if you have to do this, then you'll have to do this. Like, I write it out, and I take the time I have them come over 15 minutes early. I take the time to go through every single item with them. When I did not have my own child, I wasn't married, I did some babysitting in college, and I never had a parent write out anything for me, and I really wish I could just go back in time and have them do that. I remember several times actually where a parent would then come home and be upset with me over a detail that I missed. And they had just spewed out so much information to me at the beginning of me watching them that I didn't remember. I honestly could say, I'm so sorry, like I had no idea. I didn't remember that. I've even had a parent be upset at me because I didn't know something that they actually didn't tell me. And there was no way that I could prove you didn't tell me that. I was just like, you didn't tell me that. And so it really can help with a miscommunication there as well. And I felt terrible. I want to feel good about the work I'm doing. So we want our childcare workers to feel good as well. So if there is something that's really important to us, even if it's just as little as make sure the curtains are closed when they go to bed. Now that I'm a parent, that's common sense to me. If it's light out, obviously the curtains need to be closed. But if I, as an adult, am taking a nap, I don't make it really dark in my room. So I've struggled with that before. When I didn't have children, I didn't know that was a thing. And I've had babysitters come over and not remember to close the curtains. And I have a video monitor on my phone, so I always check after my daughter goes to bed to make sure the curtains are closed still. But like I just would have to remind them, even if I did write it down. But anyway, my point is that there can be inconsistencies with things that our childcare workers have to remember, and so we can't just assume that if we've told them it once that they'll remember it again later, especially if they don't have children of their own. So just be gracious with them, even if you have told them things before. If you've said she needs to nap at this time, she needs to eat at this time, make sure they remember. Make sure you say, are they eating at this time? Are they sleeping at this time? When my daughter was young enough, I would have our babysitters record everything they did on an app that I could, see and be updated on. And that was mostly just for like feed times and sleep times. Those were still very important when my daughter was younger. And so if you do have a young child and somebody who has to do something specific at a certain time, then that can be helpful as well to like have them log it when they do it. And that keeps them accountable so that they want to know that they're doing good, let's be honest. I've said a lot about this topic. I'm gonna move on. Also, another thing that we need to do if a routine buster is a problem is to remember that poor baby syndrome exists and we can't give in to it. So especially when our child is teething or has an illness or something's come up, maybe they've been injured or had to have surgery, we can give into like, oh, like poor baby, she seems so sad in her crib by herself. I'm gonna take her into my bed with me and it's just gonna be until she gets better. And then it's been weeks, maybe even months, and you can't get them back in their own bed. That's a huge problem that I've heard about several times. So we just need to go back to square one. If there's any trust that's been broken, then we need to repair that and make sure that they're safe, that they feel safe in their own room, maybe even sleep with them, and then go back to pick up, put down. And then of course the last thing that we need to do when routine busters are a problem is plan ahead. So especially if we've been taking trips or vacations, or even if we're just about to go and run a bunch of errands and have an exhausting day, we need to plan ahead. We need to plan the correct times to do those things, plan naps. And if we've been traveling, just take time to plan for, like, if there's been a time change that your child will need time to adjust to the different time change, or to adjust back once they've come home. And just don't plan anything difficult for them while they make those adjustments. The next two questions, questions 9 and 10, have to do with our family environment, and we really need to make sure that we are protecting our family environment. So question number 9 is, are you or another adult ill or going through an emotionally difficult time? And question 10 is, has your household environment changed? Have there been more arguments, a new nanny, a new baby, job change? Have you moved? Has there been an illness or a death in the family? So these are things that, even though they might not affect our child's day-to-day schedule, they are affecting the environment in which they live in, and they're affecting the adults that take care of them. Even if they are taken care of by a nanny or by daycare workers, if something in their lives has changed, then that can affect our child as well. Children really soak up everything. They soak up our emotions. They watch us. They watch the way that we react to things, and they can really just sense when we are going through a difficult time. So the most important thing, especially if we're dealing with grief or with pain, or just like an intense illness or just a very busy season, is to talk to them about it. They need to learn at some point about death or illness or things that are more difficult. So obviously we have to be age appropriate when we do talk to them about the way that we may be feeling or processing events that have happened in our life. But if we bring them to the light and say like, oh, mommy is just sad right now because this happened, like, how does that make you feel? Because they could be affected by it as well. If we've lost a close family member, even if they didn't know them very well, they still lost somebody in their family too. So talking to them about it and helping them to realize that this is a part of life can help them manage it better and understand more why things might feel different at their home. So make sure that we're including them in conversations, and we should be letting them ask questions and understand why things might feel a little off. So if they are wondering, Mom, why aren't you smiling anymore? That sounds so sad. But you know, things happen. We grieve in some parts of our life. We could be angry, upset, stressed, anything. Just giving them an environment in which they can feel free to ask questions that might seem hard or difficult to understand will really help them and help us open up to them as well. But it's also important that we're taking care of our own emotional needs during this time. So we need to make sure that we have support from others, no matter what that looks like. If it's a spouse, other family members, friends, counseling, things like that. We need to be in a state where we can still take care of our child and we're not just floundering with ourselves. But if we're in a good place with ourselves and we can take care of ourselves, then we should be able to take care of our child too. Now questions 11 and 12 have to do with accidental parenting. So question 11 is, have you been accidentally reinforcing a bad behavior by giving into it? And question 12 is, have you recently tried a new method of child rearing because something else didn't work? So these are both classic accidental parenting questions. So the problem is that we keep changing the rules on our child when these are our problems. We let them get away with something one moment and then an hour later they do it again and we snap. Or yesterday this was bad, but actually today is probably fine if we do it. And they can get really confused by that. Like I said before, they're sponges. They're taking in everything. Even if they are rebelling against the rules we're setting up, they're trying to understand them. And if the rules constantly change, then all they understand is chaos and that they can get away with stuff. And maybe this behavior will be fine today. I don't know. I'll test it out and we'll see. And this can really cause other problems to linger longer than they need to. So throwing is a developmental milestone that we've talked about before, but it can become an aggressive behavior, especially as our children become toddlers and have more strength. So if we don't want our child to throw, or even just to throw food, but we give into it, and then once something breaks or something valuable is thrown or something's thrown at a person, all of a sudden it's bad. That can be confusing. And if we just start from the beginning with throwing and set boundaries and rules around that, then the problem will be a lot it'll be taken care of a lot earlier than it would be if we let it continue to go on and let it get by us multiple times. So that was the 12 problem solving questions that we should ask ourselves. And she also here has 12 solutions. So this is kind of just like a reflection of the questions and of the way I've explained the questions, but I do think it is worth going into. So once you've asked yourself these questions and you've figured out the root of your problem, then you can go through these solutions. So number one is to identify the root of the problem. So that is going through those questions and making sure you're being honest about the way that you're answering them. A lot of times we might want to avoid guilt or might want to avoid putting the blame on ourselves or on our child or on certain situations. So we might be like, oh no, that's probably not it. But we need to really think through each of these questions and ask ourselves, could this really be the problem? It's important that we are actually able to identify the problem because that's the only way we'll be able to solve it. Number two is figure out what to handle first. So when we ask ourselves these questions, there might be a yes to several of the answers, especially if our child is reaching a developmental milestone, which has affected their eating and their sleep, and there's also other stuff happening in the family, and it can just keep going. Everything can affect each other, basically. So we have to figure out what to handle first. It could be the easy, more simple matter of, okay, my child, their routine has been off, so let's just fix that. And then we'll see if that helps anything else. Maybe that'll help them sleep better. Maybe it'll help them behave better in preschool. It could solve more problems than one. But we also might need to do the harder thing first. If it's a bigger problem, if our child is misbehaving often in public, throwing lots of tantrums, but they also have had a change to their eating habits, then we might just want to focus on the tantrums because it is a bigger problem than the eating habits. The eating habits isn't as big as an issue. So it's really up to you, whatever you want to do first. Whatever you think is more manageable, you might choose the easier, smaller problem just because of where you're at with your time, and you might choose a bigger, harder problem because you just want it to nip it in the bud as fast as possible. Number 3 is to go back to the basics, especially if we do have a routine buster on our hands. Make sure we're going through easy, doing pick up, put down, and just whatever we have committed to, just sticking with that. So just being regular, being consistent, as we always talk about, that is the most important thing, is to have some consistency with the parenting method that we choose, and that will help our child to understand what normal should look like. Number 4 is accept what you can't change. So things like temperament or developmental milestones are things that we can't necessarily change. So we need to understand what the problems are that we want to fix and what they are that we can't fix. If our child just is shy, we're not going to be able to make them outgoing, but we need to understand and meet them where they are and help them to open up a little in that way, but understand that they might not ever, and that's okay. They're their own person. Number 5, decide if the solution that you're choosing is good for the long run. So if it's in the Baby Whisperer book, it probably is a long-term fix. But if it's not, it could be a good long-term fix, but it also could just be a band-aid for the problem. So if your child has been teething or ill, like I mentioned earlier, you might be tempted to bring them into bed with you at night if their sleeping is disturbed by those disturbances. But that is just a band-aid. It's not going to actually help them sleep better. It's just going to create more problems in the future. So the best solution is to make sure that we're actually addressing their pain and to give them medication if they do need it, and that will help them in their sleep. Or we can stay in their room with them and spend time with them that way to help comfort them. But we just need to make sure that even if it is more work for us to be sleeping on the floor of their room, that that's actually a long-term fix, and that as soon as the illness or the is gone and the tooth is in, that we'll be back to our own rooms. We won't have to undo anything that we decided to do, but everything will just kind of come back to that equilibrium that we've been chasing. Number 6, comfort your child when they need it. So of course, like I mentioned, I keep mentioning teething and illness. That's probably a big one for babies and toddlers. They do need comfort during those times. If they're dealing with a sickness, or if they're in pain or uncomfortable, or they have a big life change, they need emotional comfort. That is so important to give it to them. So we can't just abandon them to their rooms and say, no, like, this is your room and this is mine, and be harsh about that. But we can be more gentle in the way that we do manage that. Like I said, sleeping with them, maybe taking some more time to sit with them before we leave the room while they're falling asleep, things like that. Especially if they are struggling, if they're starting preschool for the first time, if you have a new baby. I know that's so hard. If you just had your second baby recently, it can be very difficult to try to give your oldest one more attention, but they do need it. They're going through a huge life transition that will hopefully get better and easier as time goes on. But especially if they are going through other things like social situations that they haven't been used to during that time, then they're going to need more time with you and time to be comforted by you. Number 7 is to stay in charge. Don't over comfort them and give them everything they want. So that's kind of the opposite of comforting. We need to find a balance between comforting and drawing the line and not giving in to too much. Even if we don't know how to handle a situation, we need to stay in charge. We can't just let the behavior play out on its own. Sometimes that is the case where it's just developmental and we have to let it pass and let our child get used to it. But if it is behavior we want to stop, by being silent and not voicing, hey, you need to not do that, we're giving in. We're letting our child take the charge and set their own rules. So even if they are doing something and we don't know how to stop them from doing it, every time they do it, we can at least call them out and say, I don't want you to do that. And you know, the wheels might just need to turn in our head for a little longer as we come up with a solution to get them to stop doing that problem. But we need to stay in charge and say, this is not okay. this needs to stop, even if we don't have a solution completely worked out yet. Number 8 is to go to your child, never bring them to you. So I've said this several times now. Sorry, I keep repeating myself. But it's important that we help our child to be comfortable with where they are physically. If they are having trouble sleeping in their own bed, we need to help them sleep in their own bed. We can't just bring them into our bed. But this also can go with picking up our child. This is a huge thing before, they can come to us, is if they're playing in one room on the floor, it's supposed to be independent playtime, but they might have some separation anxiety. We're in the kitchen making dinner. Obviously, we need to go to them and walk over to them, but our temptation might be, if they are crying because they're afraid that we're gone and their separation anxiety there, that we would run over and swoop them up into our arms and bring them to us as quickly as possible. And by doing that, we're sending them the message like, you're right, you weren't safe over here by yourself. Let me swoop you into my arms and pick you up, and you'll be safe here in my arms. Which obviously we want our child to be safe in our arms, but they will feel safe in our arms naturally, no matter what. Instead, we should go over to them and get down on their level on the floor, sit next to them, be eye level, and say it's okay, and try to comfort them from that position. And of course, we can, sit them on our lap while we're on the floor, or give them a hug if they need extra comfort. But we need to teach them, you're safe in this room. I'm just right over there. I'm here if you need me. I will come to you. But you need to sit here and you need to play by yourself for a little bit while I cook. And so that's a great example. I really struggled with that when my daughter first got separation anxiety. She got separation anxiety really early though. She got it at 5 months. And I didn't know if it was separation anxiety at first because I thought it only came around like 7 or 8 months. But then I went to the doctor and the doctor was like, yeah, this is definitely separation anxiety. So I was like, okay, so I'm not crazy. So I wasn't handling it very well before I actually knew it was separation anxiety. And then I realized I was doing this. So I was actually able to get down on her level more and teach her that it's okay to be on your own for a little bit. Number 9, commit yourself to a plan. This is my plan and I'm so committed to it. I hope that I will be forever. But if one day I'm just like, you know what, I don't think this is good or this is working for a child, I need to commit myself to a different plan. I can't just kind of come up with something along the way and figure out day to day what is going to feel or seem better for my child. I just have to stick with something, and we shouldn't give up if it doesn't work immediately. If we try pick up put down the first night and it doesn't immediately fix all of our child's sleep issues, we can't give it up. That's a core problem of what we've probably been doing, is that we haven't been consistent and haven't stuck to a plan. So we need to stick with something for a while before we can see if it's actually worth continuing to do. Most plans, no matter what you choose, even if it's not this book, will work if you give it time. So I personally would not do like cry it out, controlled crying. Tracy's obviously against it. I've never tried it, never want to, but I know lots of families and lots of parents where it actually worked really well for them, or they did the Ferber method or something like that. And I have nothing against that because it worked, because they kept doing it. And a lot of the problems that Tracy has with parents in this book who tried control crying is that they tried control crying. They didn't stick with it. So I do think controlled crying works. It just only works if you stick with it. And it's torture to us because we have to listen to our children cry for so long, and that's why we don't stick with it. But if we don't think we can stick with it, we shouldn't choose it. And that's mostly how I found the Baby Whisperer book anyway. I was interested in sleep training and I did not think I could stick with a cry it out method, and I found that she had an interesting different method, so I got the book so I could read about it. Whatever you choose, whatever it is, no judgment, be consistent, and stay the course. Don't give up. That will always make things worse. Number 10 is to be a PC parent. That is her phrase of being patient and conscientious toward our child. So being patient with them to give them time to learn things. And that includes with, like, if we start doing the easy routine, being patient and giving them time to adjust to that as well, but also being conscientious and being in touch with them. So understanding their emotional style, their temperament, the way that they behave in social situations will help us to be a better parent, because we'll be more in tune with our child and with their needs and with their likes and dislikes as well. Number 11 is to take care of yourself. We talked about this a little bit before with family environment changes. If you can't care for yourself, then you can't care for your child whether that is emotionally or physically. I think most of us know that physically, but emotionally, if we're having a difficult time, if we're going through anxiety or depression, then we're gonna have a difficult time also keeping our child's emotions in check and helping them through problems. If we have a toddler who's going through the terrible twos, and maybe we just had our second baby, but we have postpartum depression from that, then obviously the new baby is a huge change, but your toddler can feel your depression as well. And so just make sure if you're going through something like that, that you have help, that you have support to help your toddler, that they are being cared for emotionally and that their needs are being met emotionally, and that will help fix those tantrums that they might be having as well. And then number 12 is to learn from the experience. I would say that's probably the most important one, because if we just keep having things come up and we never learn from them, then we're just gonna create more problems from ourselves. So if we learn, oh, when I'm not consistent, things get worse. Or if I skirt around my baby's schedule and I skip a nap or two, it's not gonna be good. It might take her a few days to recover. That's how we learn, and that's how we avoid those problems in the future. So things that we can do is we can prepare ahead of time. If we think we might miss our child's nap, prepare ahead of time for them to be able to nap. Rearrange your schedule so that you can protect their time. Start looking for patterns in their behavior. If they keep having random wakings at night, see if there's any pattern there, if it's in the time and the way that they wake up, things like that. And make note of how you deal with the issues. So if you decide to do pick up, put down, if you decide to do the wake to sleep technique, if you decide to do something behaviorally with them to help fix a behavioral problem, and it does work, then remember that and keep going back to it. And if it doesn't work, try to figure out why it didn't work. Were you not consistent? Were you not preparing? Did you not fully understand the problem? Did you think the problem was something else, but it was actually this? So just make note of that. I don't write down anything. I just kind of remember from the past, if something comes up, I'm like, this reminds me of this problem I dealt with 3 months ago. And especially as we have more children too, we'll start to see similarities with problems that might come up between them and be like, oh, this worked for their sister, so maybe I'll try it with them. And just remember things. If you do need to take notes and you do keep seeing problems come up that seem similar, then keep track of that trend and see how you can better make things go away faster. So anyway, that concludes the chapter. It's really great. That concludes the book. Yeah, I'm so glad to be done with this. I've loved rereading this book as a whole, because when I first got it, I only read the sections that had to do with my daughter's age, and as she grew up, I would go back to those sections. But seeing everything the way that Tracy lays it out is really great. She has a very clear understanding of things that are age appropriate for our children, things that are developmentally appropriate, and ways that we can actually connect with our babies. So this is the last video in our series. I'm happy to be wrapping it up. I know that they've been long, but hopefully they've been helpful to you. In 2 weeks, I want to start doing shorter videos that tackle more specific topics. So if you have any ideas for those videos, please leave a comment below. Let me know if you want me to go into depth about my own experiences or about things that Tracy says in the book, or if you have a problem that you're dealing with and you want advice on that, then I'm sure lots of other parents are struggling with the same thing and they would love advice too. So leave those down below. Go ahead, give this video a like, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe so you can be alerted when future videos come out as well. Thanks for watching.